Hey, it's Ted McGrath, and welcome to today's show. So I'm going to jump in and talk about strategy potentially being added to the S&P 500, what that would mean for the actual stock, what the percentage move in the actual stock could be once they're added. I'm going to give you historical examples of things like Coinbase and Robinhood and Tesla and how much the stock jumped when they were added to the S&P 500. And then we're going to talk about maybe the likelihood of strategy actually being added. So we will know on September 5th, which is Friday tomorrow, if they are going to be added. The announcement will be made after hours. And so we're going to take a look at how much money could flow into strategy in this video. All right. So not tax advice, not financial advice, not legal advice. Do your own research on this. Strategy is very volatile, just like other stocks and investments that I talk about on this channel. And make sure you're doing your own advice. This is just educational content only. All right, so we jump in here and take a look at some math. Take out a pen and piece of paper. We're going to jump in and show you what could potentially happen with strategy being included in the S&P 500. Let's put a spade where a spade is. It has been not pretty lately. Strategy is trading around 329 or 330 as of today, maybe lower as the stock potentially dropped when the market opened. So we are not looking, it's down at 322. So it's not looking pretty this month. September has not been looking good. Bitcoin was flying up the other day to about 111, 112, and then has dropped down to 109. Strategy, as I talk, is about 322. So there's a big drop, and Bitcoin is down as well. So news coming in September, the S&P 500 inclusion will be announced for strategy tomorrow after hours. Somewhere after 4 p.m. Eastern, after the markets close in the regular trading hours. So if we look at what the potential is, let's see, maybe there's a 50-50 potential opportunity for strategy to get included. They do check all the boxes, and that's an important thing to know. So they check the boxes, but it comes down to basically a committee vote at this point. So will the committee decide that strategy is too volatile, they're too unorthodox, they hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and will they decide they're too volatile and not to add them to the S&P 500, or will they decide to add them to the S&P 500? And maybe we have companies like BlackRock that own 5% of strategy that might have some influence in getting them on the S&P 500 because they have a vested interest in doing it. Okay, so that's one. We'll find that out tomorrow. Number two, Fed interest rate cuts coming in mid-September. The likelihood is very, very high. The Jackson Hole address that Powell did a week and a half ago or so, talking about the Fed becoming more dovish, was good news, and we look like we're going to have some interest rate cuts. So if strategy gets included in S&P 500, if the interest rate cuts happen, there's some hope for the future. But I wanted to get on and give you some hope, because when you see it dropping down to 322, which we haven't seen in a while, there's not a lot of hope. And it is sad, to your point in the comments. But I have not sold. I'm still holding on to the stock, just so you know. Okay. So with that said, let's take a look at the math of what could potentially happen here. So number one, if you look at the S&P 500 and you look at the assets under management in terms of the entire S&P 500, the assets under management are about 10 to 11 trillion dollars. If you look at the market cap of the S&P 500, which is the market capitalization of all the companies involved in the S&P 500, that's $54 trillion. So the way that we're going to calculate the inflows is based on the assets under management of the total S&P 500 assets under management, which is about 10 to 11 trillion dollars. Okay, that's like the ETFs, the mutual funds that mirror the S&P 500 index. Okay, so let's take a look at mathematically how we get there and how we get to potentially $19 billion of inflows coming to strategy and what that would potentially do for the stock. Okay, so the first and foremost, if you look at the S&P 500 at $54 trillion market cap, the way that we get to strategy's percentage of that market cap is simple. Just write it down, okay? So you have strategy's market cap that is about 95 billion, 96 billion. As of today, it dropped. But let's just say their market cap is 95 billion for strategy, okay? So what you do is you take the market cap of strategy at 95 billion, and then you divide the market cap of the S&P 500, which is 54 trillion, into Strategy's market cap of 95 billion, and then you get 0.17%. So Strategy's makeup of the S&P 500 is 0.17%. Does this make sense? Also known as 17 basis points. So when you're trying to figure out how much inflows are going to come into Strategy if they get included into the S&P 500, that's the math. You take Strategy's market cap, which is 95 billion approximately. You divide it by the S&P 500 market cap, which is about 54 trillion, and you get a 0.17% basis points. Okay. So that's the math on it, on how you get the inflows that are going to, 0.17%, which is 17 basis points. So that's the math on it of the potential inflows that come into Strategy. So with 0.17% in terms of the share of the pie that Strategy will get in terms of inflows of money, then we go to the next piece of math and we look at how much inflows could they get. Okay. So everybody tracking me so far, all right? So the potential inflows, if they have 1.17% of the pie of the S&P 500, we multiply 0.17% by the assets under management in the S&P 500. So the assets under management in the S&P 500 are about $11 trillion. So you multiply $11 trillion times 0.17%, which is Strategy's share of the pie of the market cap in the S&P 500. And so what you get is about $19 billion of inflows. Make sense? So the potential for Strategy, if they get included, which we will know tomorrow after hours, the potential of inflows is $19 billion into the stock. Now, again, if you're just joining us, the possibility of them getting included, we will see. They check all the boxes, except they have not checked the committee approval box yet. And so if the committee decides it's too volatile, it's too unorthodox, they hold too much Bitcoin on their balance sheet, stock goes up and down too much, they might say, no, not this time, and we'd have to wait for a vote again in December. So call it a coin toss, 50-50. We'll see what happens, and we'll see whether they actually get included. If they do get included, you will know tomorrow night. So let me give you historically what's happened with some stocks that we're all familiar with when they get added to the S&P 500. Now, the inclusion date in terms of when the funds have to rebalance their portfolios to adjust for Strategy being included is not till September 19th. So basically, these funds that mirror the S&P 500, they must rebalance their portfolios by September 19th. So the announcement happens tomorrow, and then by September 19th, these funds must rebalance their portfolios. Now, in the past, what's typically happened with some examples we can look at, and of course, these examples don't indicate whether this is going to happen with Strategy or not, but these are some examples to look at what happened when Tesla got added to the S&P 500, what happened when Coinbase got added to the S&P 500, what happened when Robinhood got added to the S&P 500, and you look at their makeup in terms of the market cap that they take up of the S&P 500, the percentage. Tesla is obviously much bigger. They had a bigger market cap than Strategy when they got added to the S&P 500 back in 2020 in December. Coinbase got added to the S&P 500 recently. They have a lower market cap than Strategy. And then you have Robinhood, who also got added to the S&P 500. They had a lower market cap than Strategy. So what that means is the inflows going into going into Robinhood and going into Coinbase were less inflows than would be going into Strategy. The approximate inflows that went into Coinbase when they got added to the S&P 500 was $6 billion of inflows. The approximate inflows that came into Robinhood when they were added to the S&P 500 was about $1.5 to $2 billion of inflows. All right. And then Tesla, when they were added, they had a whole heck of a lot more inflows than anybody else because their market cap was higher. And so their percentage of flows that came into them was higher than Strategy, Coinbase, Robinhood. Make sense? All right. So that's the basic idea. Now, if you look at what happened with Tesla stock from the moment that the announcement was made. Now, remember, there's an announcement and then there's the inclusion date where the funds have to rebalance their portfolios by that date. So the announcement for strategy is tomorrow, and the inclusion date would be September 19th if they're included. All right. So when this happened with Tesla, Tesla's stock jumped about 70% the following week as a result of being included in the S&P 500. Again, their market cap was way higher, so the percentage of inflows that they got coming into Tesla was massive compared to what strategies would be. All right, so their stock went up a lot. When you look at Coinbase, Coinbase was added and their inflows were about $6 billion, and so the stock went up about 12% to 20%. The moment they got included and the announcement was made after hours, the stock spiked that night. Same thing with Tesla. The moment the announcement was made, which for strategy would be tomorrow, the stock spiked that night. And then the following week, as these funds are rebalancing their portfolios, the stock continues to spike even more. All right. So that's historically what's happened with Robinhood. If you look at them, when the announcement was made for them to be included, the stock after hours spiked 10%. And then it went on to do 15 to 18% over the following week cumulative. Okay. So you look at these jumps, Tesla, higher market cap, so they get a bigger inflow from the S&P 500, 70% move. Coinbase, smaller market cap, 6 billion of inflows, 12 to 20% movement in the stock. Robinhood, even smaller inflows, $2 billion, because they have a smaller market cap and they get less inflows, and then they moved about 15 to 18%. All right. So, one could hypothesize and say that if strategy does get included, you could expect a bump of anywhere from 10% to 20% in the following week. Maybe when the announcement comes out, perhaps that day or that night, it would be after hours for us when it happens tomorrow. So we might see some after hours trading. We might see some hedge funds doing some buying and rebalancing. And then Monday, we would probably see the bump in the market spike next week. So that's the basic idea. Does this make sense to everybody? Yeah. All right. So that's the idea of what's happening. Yes, the news is crappy for strategy. Nobody likes to see a drop. We were up at 450. Now we're down to 320. That's over a 30% drop. That is crappy. The news is not good. This is hope for what could happen. We could get good news tomorrow, 50-50. We'll see. If they get added, it would send shockwaves. It would be exciting. If the Fed cuts interest rates in mid-September, more shockwaves, more inflows, because we know when the Fed cuts interest rates, money flows into risk on assets like strategy, like Bitcoin. And after mid-September, we could have a nice run. Historically, in the bull runs, if we are in a bull run, which I believe we are, but the historical patterns that we used to follow in the bull runs are a little bit different now because we have ETFs, we have institutions, and we have different things going on. So will we see a good October and a good November? I believe we will. After the Fed cuts interest rates, we could see a spike up. September is typically not a great month during the bull run, so we will see what happens. But this would be very, very, very good news for strategy, and it would be very good news if we had an S&P 500 inclusion and if we had interest rate cuts. All right. Now, the announcement, typically when this happens for stocks and there is an announcement, there is a spike like within the 24-hour period or that day. Again, this is coming after hours, so the spike would come after hours and probably on Monday. So for all of these stocks I mentioned, Tesla, Coinbase, Robinhood, spike immediately once the announcement was made. So the announcement comes and then the inclusion date follows 2 weeks after, which would be September 19th. And again, these funds that have passive flows coming into them, they are obligated to rebalance their portfolios by September 19th. So you will see a lot of the rebalancing happening the moment the announcement is made. And then that inflow for strategy could potentially be $19 billion, maybe $15 to $19 billion. It depends on their market cap. So it's based on their market cap, which their share of the S&P 500 is about 0.17%, which is 17 basis points. So you take the assets under management of the S&P 500, which is about 10 to 11 trillion, you multiply it by 0.17%, and you get inflows of about $18-19 billion into strategy. That's big. Remember, Coinbase had $6 billion of inflows. Robinhood had $1.5 to $2 billion of inflows. Strategy getting $19 billion of inflows would be massive. Massive. All right. So that is the game. We will see what happens. That is the game. We will see what happens. You might see a lot of buying from hedge funds, because hedge funds know once the announcement's made, they know that these passive funds must rebalance their portfolios by the 19th. So they know there's going to be a run up. So you're probably going to see hedge funds dive into this thing, start buying. And then by the time, September 19th comes, the hedge funds will probably dump a whole bunch of the stock. All right. So we will see. If it's not added to the S&P 500, to answer your question down there, Serge, if MSTR is not added, we will get another opportunity in December. And I think by December, there should be a definite inclusion, considering the fact that they should have good quarterly earning reports again and profitable earnings reports. And that means in December, I think they would get the vote in. I'm like crossing the fingers. I mean, wouldn't it be great if tomorrow was the day, right? Like if you're a betting person at this point, you're probably 50-50, considering the fact that the sentiment on the stock right now sucks, right? Like nobody likes to see this stock down at 320. So if you're a betting man, you're crossing fingers for 50-50, we'll see. We'll see what happens. And I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. So that's why I'm giving you a 50-50. So that's interesting. If you're just joining us, again, I'm just going to do a quick recap on this. If you want to figure out how much inflows could go into strategy, it is significant, right? To check the box to get added onto the S&P 500, your market cap needs to be in the 20-something billion dollar range. They're in the $95 billion range of their market capitalization for the stock. Let's not forget this stock was $1 billion market cap like 5 years ago. In the last 5 years, it's gone up to a $95 billion market cap. It's a significant bump, right? If you got in and you bought into strategy when it was at, in the 300 range or whatever, 400 range, you're disappointed because the stock's down. I do duplicate and understand. I bought in when it was at the $79 range and the $100 and something range. So I'm sitting here watching it go down and probably not in the position that some other people are because I'm still in the profits. But if you're not in the profits right now, I duplicate the frustration. It sucks. It's a pain in the ass. However, September is historically not a good month. And we are coming into an interest rate cut. It looks very, very likely for this. And we're potentially going to get an S&P 500 inclusion. So that's good news. Again, the inflows, strategies, market cap, in terms of their market cap compared to the market cap of the S&P 500, they get 0.17% of the flows. So with $11 trillion of assets under management in the S&P 500, then their percentage of that is 0.17% of inflows into the stock, which is about $19 billion. Okay. Could be less depending on how they're calculating the market cap of the time. Today, their market cap is down because they were at 330 yesterday and now they're at 321. So let's say the inflows are anywhere between 15 billion and 19 billion into the stock. Whatever it is, I mean, that's significant. That's significant. All right. So let's see what happens with strategy. I don't think personally, this is not financial advice, that this stock is dead, guys. Like this is the number one holder of Bitcoin on the planet next to BlackRock. But for any corporation, they have printed and minted the playbook. If you look at other treasury companies, many of them are down. BMR, that holds the most Ethereum on the planet, is down. So this is just September is the rough month. August, we started to see the declines. It's just where we're at right now. Remember, the bull run is around the corner. I expect a very good October and a very good November. So I am still holding strategy, not financial advice. I have not lost hope, but I do feel the pain like everybody else. When the stock's down, let's call it what it is. It sucks. Nobody likes it. This is the volatility of holding this stock. It goes up and down. And I've been sitting through this volatility since early 2024 in February when I first bought the stock. And so I've seen 50% moves before. I've been through many ups and then downs of 50% of strategy, not one time, not two times, not three times, but more. Okay. So that's what happens holding a stock like this. Let's see if we rebound and jump back up. and we hit some higher highs. Okay. So I hope this serves you all. Again, pay attention. Final recap is tomorrow the announcement comes out for the S&P 500, and whether strategy will be included. So that's the announcement. September 19th, the inclusion takes place, where all the portfolios must be rebalanced by that date. When they're rebalanced, strategy will get 0.17% of the assets under management inflowing. Those inflows happen pretty much immediately. Historically, when Coinbase and Robinhood and Tesla got added to the S&P 500, the stock spikes right away after the announcement. It did it for Coinbase right away. It did it for Robinhood right away. It did it for Tesla right away. And then the following week, as the companies are rebalancing their portfolios because they have to hit the deadline of inclusion by September 19th, where all of their portfolios are rebalanced. So they're rebalancing their portfolios, which means they're buying up strategy stock to put it into their portfolios. And so that's more and more bump to the stock. And typically a week after the announcement, which is tomorrow, there would be a run up in the stock as well. So immediate run up in the stock, and then typically after a run up in the stock. I don't know if that's going to happen for strategy when it happens, but historically that's happened for Coinbase, Robinhood, and Tesla stocks that I pay attention to. Okay. So let's see what happens if they don't get added to the S&P 500. I would say hope is up. Don't get the hopes way up on this. Let's see what happens. They do check the box. So I would say it would be a shame for this company not to be added. If it doesn't happen in September, I believe it will happen definitely in December. Okay. So let's see what happens. Other news that's happening in the space. I'm a big fan of BMR, as I've shared in my last several videos. I'm just going to touch on that briefly in terms of Ethereum and what's happening in the marketplace with that. I hold that stock, so not financial advice on any of this. I hold strategy. I have not sold strategy. I'm not selling my strategy right now. I will take profits towards the end of the year. BMR, I hold that stock. I've continued to hold it through the downturns, and I trade that stock on a daily basis, and I do very, very, very well trading the stock. So with that said, why has some of my attention shifted to paying attention to Ethereum? Because Wall Street's attention has shifted to paying attention to Ethereum. And if that's where Wall Street's going and that's where the money's going, then I'm putting attention on that. So I will still continue to cover MSTR on the show. I'll still continue to cover Bitcoin on the show, but I'm also going to be touching on Ethereum and BMR. If you don't know what BMR is, BMR actually is a company that's headed up by Tom Lee as the chairman. They own the most Ethereum on the planet in terms of a treasury company. And they've now got about $8 billion of Ethereum in their treasury. So they are literally following the exact MSTR playbook, and they are buying up Ethereum versus buying up Bitcoin like MSTR has bought up. MSTR's goal is to own about 5% of the supply of of Bitcoin. They own over 3% of the supply of Bitcoin right now. And BMR's play is to go and own 5% of the Ethereum supply. Why does this matter? Number one, the stock is extremely volatile. So if you think strategy is volatile, I think this stock's even more volatile. It ran up to $72 weeks ago in August, the stock, and it dropped all the way down to 41 at its lowest here in the last week. I have a cost basis in the stock. Because I've been trading it, my original cost basis was $60. I've been trading it, so my cost basis is probably down to $57 or $56 right now on the stock. And the stock is currently sitting at about $41.48. So this thing moves like a behemoth. It was up to $45 yesterday. It's dropped 7% in a day. All right. So these are just very, very volatile investments, and this is not financial advice, and I'm sharing this just because I think it's something to pay attention to. When we looked at what strategy did in 2020, it was something to pay attention to. I remember buying into the stock in 2020 is when I bought my first shares, very, very little, and then I sold them, but I was interested in the stock because of what they were doing, buying up Bitcoin, and I was paying attention to strategy in 2020. And so now when you look at the next company that is following the playbook, but following it with Ethereum, and they will be the leader, and I don't think anybody will catch BMR from owning the most Ethereum out of any corporation out there, it's one to pay attention to. They're kind of having their moment that Strategy had in 2020 and came to fruition in 2024 in terms of the stock booming. And so now they're having their moment in 2025 with owning the most Ethereum. So it's interesting to watch. The reason why it's interesting to watch and why Ethereum is interesting to watch, and there's been a lot of mixed reviews over ETH over the last, year or so. And, ETH was doing nothing really over the last year until recently. And then ETH eventually hit its all-time high about a week and a half ago, where it went over 4,900 and change. And it had not hit an all-time high in a long time. So it was sleeping, and ETH has just run up. So why do major players have their attention on ETH right now? And if you follow Tom Lee, who's the chairman of BMR that owns Ethereum, he talks a lot about Ethereum, and the base case of what he makes for why ETH is going to be a player and will continue to go up is pretty strong. And many people have complained about the fees over the last, several years, how ETH is a slower chain, its fees are high, but Wall Street is paying attention. And if you look at Project Crypto, which SEC came out with Project Crypto, which is basically the idea that Wall Street is going to be moving onto the blockchain. All right. And then if you look at the Genius Act with the Stablecoin Act, and the fact that every stablecoin needs to be backed by US dollars or US Treasury bills, we see another reason for the government and banks literally being in bed with Ethereum, because the majority of Ethereum of stablecoins is held on the Ethereum blockchain. More than 50% of the stablecoins are held on the Ethereum blockchain. And I think the stat is almost as high as 70%. So now we got the banks in bed with the stable coins, because if every stable coin, which are digital dollars, needs to be backed by a US dollar, that means the banks win. And the banks are interested in seeing this blockchain. They're interested in seeing stable coins win, and they're interested in seeing Ethereum win, because stable coins are held on the Ethereum blockchain. The majority are. So if Wall Street's moving there with Project Crypto, and the Genius Act was passed, which is reinforcing stable coins where the majority are held on Ethereum, and the big money is moving there, one would just say, like, let's pay attention to what's going on. And so that's why you see a lot of the hype that's going on with Ethereum right now. And then you see a lot of talk that's going on with BMR, with the company that owns the most Ethereum. And so it's just something to take a look at. And so Tom Lee is talking about it, and he's calling it kind of like the 1971 moment when the US was taking off the gold standard and moved to the dollar, to synthetic dollar. The dollar was no longer backed by gold, so it became a synthetic dollar. When that happened, Wall Street really just was born in a big way, to where it just, Wall Street just started creating all kinds of products based on this synthetic dollar. All right. And that was the big boom of Wall Street. When you looked at money market funds being created, you looked at credit instruments being created, you looked at all kinds of different products, currency swaps being created by Wall Street. So you looked at all these different products being created by Wall Street, which created a massive market for the dollar, and of course drove the dollar, drove the dollar through the roof in terms of Wall Street owning the dollar. Okay. And so Tom Lee is saying this is the moment, the 1971 moment, where Wall Street is now moving to the blockchain. And one of the reasons they're moving to the blockchain, number one, is they're moving to Ethereum for the most part, because Ethereum has been around for 10 years and the chain has never gone down. So from a security standpoint, it's super secure. Number two, they want their settlements of different transactions, which is why you see like the Robinhoods are already on. They're already on Ethereum. You see Coinbase has an app they built on top of Ethereum called Base. I believe Amazon is moving on to Ethereum if they're not already on it. And you see banks that are moving on to Ethereum like JP Morgan. And so you see a lot of companies that are moving on to Ethereum. And the reason is when their transactions settle, we know that it's a secure platform, that you can't change the transactions. The ledgers are immutable. And that's number one. But number two, let's face it, Wall Street wants to trade 24/7, 365. So they're going to take their bonds, they're going to take their real estate, they're going to take their stocks, they're going to wrap it up in a token, they're going to put it on the blockchain, and it's going to trade 24/7, 365. So if you're Wall Street and you're looking at the fact that you trade 9, 10, 11 hours a day, and now you can trade 24 hours a day, the potential to increase your revenue is exponential. So Wall Street is going to the blockchain, period. It is happening. And it's happening before our eyes. And they are going to, some are going to build on, some of these companies will build on Solana because, it's a faster chain, but Wall Street's going to go to what's stable. Wall Street's going to go to what is secure, and Wall Street's going to go to what's conservative, and that's Ethereum. How do they circumvent the high fees when you actually, do transactions on Ethereum? They just build what's called a layer 2, so they can build these apps on top of Ethereum that have faster transaction, lower fees, and they can build on top of the ecosystem. So this doesn't take away from the idea that Bitcoin is a store of value, and Bitcoin is totally different than Ethereum. When you look at Ethereum, Ethereum is like programmable money. If I can go onto that blockchain and build apps, if I can go on the blockchain and have smart contracts that are executing deals, and I can go onto a blockchain that's, open up 24/7, 365, and make money and build apps and move money. Ethereum is the chain for that right now in terms of Wall Street's opinion. The stablecoin market could go up, according to Scott Bessent, into the $4 trillion range. So you're looking at, a potential of the stablecoin market growing, with the majority of it being on Ethereum. That would mean that Ethereum would grow as well, because lots of transaction would be taking place on the chain. Many users would be on the chain and become more and more stable and bigger and bigger and bigger. So ETH is something to watch for sure and pay attention to not even talk about it on this channel would be not good, because it is the talk right now. And there's a reason why it's the talk, for all the reasons I just stated. So I got my eyes on it. I'm not invested in Ethereum, but I am invested in BMR. And, I have held it through the downturn because it was at 60 when I bought it, and now it's down at 41. So this is how these stocks move. And that's the volatility of stocks like this. So when I enter into something like this strategy, I know the volatility is crazy. When I enter into something like BMR, I know the volatility is crazy. But I'm looking at over the next couple months of what's going to happen during the bull run. And then with things like BMR, I do trade it on a daily basis. I will be trading it today. I traded it yesterday, and I've been trading it for weeks and weeks and weeks now. And, I'm averaging in trading it about 18% a week trading the stock. So while my portfolio is dropping, I'm lowering my cost basis by trading the stock and picking up more shares. Okay. So we will see what's going to happen with the S&P 500 inclusion of strategy tomorrow. You will know if it's a go. We will likely see a spike in the stock. Why it is just completely dropping right now? Well, the markets are dropping. Why it's dropping more than Bitcoin comparatively, and then when Bitcoin goes up, it goes up less than that. I don't have the answer to that right now. We know that the MNAV is eroding. We had MNAVs in 2024 with strategy, 2, 3, 4 on the MNAV, meaning that the stock was trading at a premium to its Bitcoin holdings, and by 2, 3, 4x. And now it's down to like 1.4 or lower. It's gone. So it's still trading at a premium, but it's just like a dismal experience right now for everybody. All right. So, but I'm still holding it, and I'm crossing fingers tomorrow for inclusion. Let's see what happens on the S&P 500. I'm 50-50 on it. I don't have a strong feeling that they're going to be included, but I'm just 50-50. I'm like, let's see what happens. Let's toss a coin. If they do, we'll celebrate. And if they don't, we will look forward to the Fed cutting interest rates mid-September. Money will flow into risk-on assets, which includes strategy. Let's also not forget that BlackRock owns 5% of strategy. Okay. So let's see what happens, my friends. Stay bullish. Okay, stay bullish for the next 3 to 4 months. This is when the magic typically happens during a bull run in October and November. So we've been holding through these awful tariffs in the April or February, March period, and we just hold through the stomach of the drop. Do you remember when strategy dropped down to 230? I did not sell then. So I held through it, and we went down to 230. Okay. So in context, 320, no bueno, particularly after we went down to 230. And let's not forget, within a 30-day period, we went back up to about, or 30 or 40, 50-day period, we went back up to 450, right? Was it 450? About 450, close. Yeah, 450. So let's not forget, we were up at 450 over a month ago, and now we've tanked back down to 320. So the volatility is real. But for me personally, I'm not going to miss what's going to happen in October and November. So I'm holding strong, not financial advice to anybody. And let's enjoy what happens in October and November, because this is what, I personally have been working all year for these next couple months. So enjoy it. Hold faith in the fact that Bitcoin is a incredible asset. We know Bitcoin hit 125 recently, and now it's down at 110. It dropped to 109 just minutes ago. So hold strong. September is typically not a great month. Hold strong for the interest rates, and cross your fingers for the S&P conclusion tomorrow. All right. Hope you guys have a great day. If you're not subscribed to the channel, I cover strategy on this channel. I cover Bitcoin. I cover Ethereum. I cover BMR. And I hope it serves you. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. And I will see you very, very soon.